Hello and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. This podcast is brought to you by FinPro Search Partners, the executive search firm for the insurtech industry on an international basis. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to hear a bit more about our recruitment services, please visit www.wearefinpro.com. I hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Ross Nichols, who is co-founder of Just Move In. Ross, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, very well, thank you. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, good. Well, this has been a little while in the coming, isn't it? Because you've been taken out by the vid, I think it was, for the last couple of weeks.
A little bit sick, yeah, a little bit sick, but fighting fit now.
Good.
Kind of.
Good to hear it. Cue some sort of coughing fit midway through the podcast.
Yeah, apologies if I do.
Not at all. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me. And this has been a little bit of a we've got James at EOS Ventures to thank for this, and the fact that we bumped into each other in Vegas. At an ITC event, and we'll sort of get into kind of why that has relevance and also non-relevance to your business. So that's quite intriguing. But I'm excited to do this. So thank you for coming on board. But before we dive in, it'd be great, customary in the Leadership Insurance podcast, to have you introduce yourself and the Just Move In business. So if you'd be so kind, it'd be great for you to explain what it is you guys do.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So Just Move In, we describe the business as the home move platform. And fundamentally, we exist to remove the stress and hassle of moving house, whether you're buying, selling, or renting a property. And we've managed to streamline over a dozen services that you need to manage at the point of moving house into a really nice digital experience, and then embed those services into our experience as well. So it's not just recommending services, but actually managing payments and registering for terms and conditions and doing that all within our platform. And it's been an interesting journey, I think, to get to the stage where we are now. We're managing around 10,000 moves a month across the UK, so significant volume. And our business model is B2B to C. So we work with organizations that have access to customers who are in the process of moving home. And then we embed our service into theirs. So it could be an estate agency business, it could be a bank, it could be any fintech. And I think ultimately all businesses have customers that are moving house at some stage, so it genuinely affects everybody. We do a range of services that you wouldn't necessarily link to insurance. So we do a lot of change of address, so notifying the council that you've moved, the water and sewage company, the energy companies, and then also moving into other areas in insurance we see as a key driver for us from a commercial perspective. But it's really important at the beginning of that experience to help build a relationship with the customer where they trust us to then make recommendations, which is where the insurtech side of what we're doing comes in later down the track. So yeah, we're a team of 50-ish people based down in Bournemouth on the south coast. And that's a bit about us. We've been going since 2000, and I'll tell you the story how we got started probably a bit later, but we originally founded the business in 2015, but actually we've been doing this full time since 2018. I'll probably tell you a bit more about that later on.
Yeah, well, I suppose let's dive into that. So talk to us about stage of funding as well, because you raised a pretty significant round earlier this year, didn't you? $9.3 million, or was it dollars or pounds? Or
no, that's the total amount we've raised. We've raised £7 million since 2018. The most recent round that we announced was it was 2 rounds combined, really. So we've raised numerous amounts over the course of the last few years. And we're actually doing another round of funding right now, which is really exciting. So I can't really say too much about that, but there's hopefully another fundraising announcement coming soon. But yeah, that's been our journey so far.
Ross, you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur. Is that a fair thing to say? You previously founded a kind of property tech startup, Roomflick. Are you happy to wear the serial entrepreneur title? Is that fair?
Serial trier, I think. I think the word entrepreneur I've never been comfortable with that word. I think it's just a little bit too fancy. I prefer business owner or business director or something a bit more operationally focused, to be honest. But yeah, I've certainly been involved in a number of startups across the years to varying levels of success, both as an employee, and I've had a few experiments along the way, let's say, some more successful than others. Roomflick that you mentioned was probably the most successful, which was flat sharing technology business that was a cross between Spare Room and Tinder. And I'd been in many flat shares over the years that were challenging, let's say, where you move in and then a few weeks later you figure out you're living with somebody who is very different to you, or potentially a bit unhinged, or just not the person you thought they necessarily were from that 1 hour session that you had with him when you were thinking about moving into the flat share. And I think Tinder had just come out, and I thought, wow, this would be a great way to find a flatmate before you actually move into a property with him, where you can match on social profiling, whether we have the same interest in music or football clubs or whatever it might be. You're more likely to get on if you do that. So I built that business. We launched it in 2015, and we were featured by Apple quite early on. So we had this fantastic growth curve for about 6 months. We had lots of nice PR written about us, and things were going really well. And then during that period, Tom and I, who's my now co-founder at Just Move In, we've been reconnected through my best friend from school, who's his brother. And Tom had just started this idea, this concept called Just Move In. And I loved the idea, and it felt natural that once you'd found your flat share, that Just Move In could help you get set up in the property with all the things that you needed to do. And so we started originally talking that year about what a partnership would look like. And then at the end of that year, we'd been through an accelerator program as Roomflick, and we were close to doing a fundraising round. And then I just realized that I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And we had a difference of opinion in terms of what the other co-founders that I brought into the business wanted to do and how they wanted to run the company. And so I ended up leaving my business at the end of that year, which was incredibly tough, probably the lowest moment for me from a mental perspective. And it was really tough, but very quickly, thankfully, bounced back. And then got chatting to Tom, bumped into each other again. And he said, well, look, I'm starting this. You've got a bunch of experience that I don't have, vice versa. Maybe we could try working together and see how things go. So I gave it some thought and then jumped at the chance to do it. I was consulting then for the next year for another business just to restore my bank balance, because I was completely broke at that point. And then during that time, we affectionately call it our work dating period, where we were just making sure that we worked well together, and we didn't want to have any disagreements or anything, because I knew his family and we'd been on holidays together as kids. So I wanted to make sure it was good, and thankfully it was, and still now is I think it's the best working relationship I've ever had with anybody in any organization I've worked in. I think there's just that deep level of trust that we now have because of that friendship that's been going back for years. And then at the end of 2017, having spent a lot of time together, me helping him out as much as possible behind the scenes, I then joined as a co-founder. And then from 2018, we've been doing this full time, which I referenced before. There were some other ideas that we were playing around with, but Just Move In was the one that everybody resonated with, and I think kept coming back to, which was, and you'll hear this if you speak to anybody, you just moved house yourself. I know people will say, I wish I had that when I moved house. And I think that's because, well, it's such a global issue, global problem. Everybody has to move house at least a dozen times, usually throughout the course of a lifetime. And I've moved well over 25 times in my life. And I think that's becoming more and more common as people rent more and move more freely, and remote working has increased that further. So we knew the opportunity was massive. And I think we're just getting to the stage now where we can really see the vision of where this is going to get to, and it has the potential to be, a game-changing business, we think.
No, I mean, I'm your perfect target client. I mean, I've moved an insane amount of times. I used to rent. I just had this thing about renting. I always found renting, because I didn't own it, I thought I love property, so I kind of just liked the idea of every 6 months I used to just move. And that was particularly in London. And I think I lived in Blackheath and Greenwich, and I think I've lived in about almost every square inch of that space for a while, and then ironically I've moved as far as Lewisham, which, if anyone knows London, it's literally the next part of town over,
around the corner from me.
We'll be neighbours very shortly. But that process is so painful, and it's such an obvious pain point, and I think the more obvious a kind of solution is the better idea it is. But I just wanted to bring it back, actually, because it's funny you talk about Roomflick and the premise of that business, and then talking about founding teams, because something most of the time we're talking to startups on here, and people want to start their own business, and just how how challenging it is to get that right, because you can have them two talented people, but it's not really. I almost think it's not about that. It's more about if you can have a really healthy working relationship, you can solve most problems. But actually getting that right, you almost need a room flick for co-founders, I think.
Oh my God, there you go. That'll be the next one.
Yeah.
I'll let you try it, not me.
Yeah, well, it's probably close to my wheelhouse. I mean, I had a partnership that didn't work when I started my first recruitment business, and not because the guy I'd worked with wasn't talented, but we agreed at the outset, and then what ended up happening was we suddenly realized, oh, actually we've got slightly different objectives for the business, and neither was wrong, but it was different directions, and then you get this kind of pull, and then it's pulling in the same direction. For me, feels like the most important thing, and you can kind of work everything out as you go. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I think
totally.
Yeah,
I totally would, and I think that's actually a really interesting point. So one of the things that we totally aligned on right at the beginning of the business was running a company ethically and wanting to do the right thing and have more purpose with our lives generally. And we saw the home move as the entry point into somebody's life, where it's this significant amount of disruption and change that's going on in their day to day, and one of the few times where they have to actively move suppliers. So you're moving from house A to house B, you have to switch suppliers. You have no choice in the matter. Whereas we know a lot of people, for example, I forget what the current stat is, but it used to be pre-COVID, it was about 34%, I think it was, the homes that have never switched energy provider, even though there's been millions of pounds spent across various websites that promote switching and the benefits and the money saving. People still just don't do it because there's this huge inertia and, oh, it's too difficult, it's too painful. So when you move, you have to go through that process. We felt if we could deliver a great experience, we could start to nudge people towards better, more ethical products and services. And the main driver of that at the beginning was actually pushing people to 100% renewable energy, which we've done since we started the company back in 2015, 16, when Tom was on his own doing it. And that's progressed to where it is now today. But yeah, I think having that aligned vision, and we're also a B corporation, which we have been since 2018, that is almost our North Star, I think, for making decisions as a group. Because ultimately, every 3 years when you come to recertify, what is that decision that you've made a week ago, a year ago, 2 years ago going to do to your score? And will you be able to recertify again? So it definitely keeps you honest and keeps you on the straight and narrow from a decision-making point of view.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to dig into the B Corp thing certainly later. And I think the values, but I think, it speaks to values. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of founders recently. It's to come out, but we talked to ULife, and they were talking about their kind of their universe, which is just around the corner from us, and values, and we talked a lot about that. And I've got a business mentor, and we're at a stage of we're significantly growing. We're hiring people we're trying to hire people. It's the mass hiring for a recruitment business, but one of the things that we keep coming back to is values. When you're so small, I think startup businesses are almost the best ones, are a bit, I don't want to use the word cult, but they are a bit cult-like. I mean that in the best possible way. Is there's the shared set of beliefs and values about what the right thing to do is probably more important than anything else. What I wanted to dig into as well is we are the Leadership in Insurance podcast. We met at an InsurTech event. We probably got to bring the insurance piece in. Insurance wasn't part of your initial offering. There was lots of everything from council tax to broadband to, of course, some of the other stuff. When did that? How has your offering evolved over time? What was the kind of journey of kind of adding different things, and kind of where does insurance come to the equation? I'm kind of wondering, I suppose, where I'm coming from, how much of that was kind of when you were talking to investors, and then was it an external idea that came into the business, or was it organic from kind of business growth, as an additional service that you might need?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, at the beginning, we didn't have any technology, we didn't have any money, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen when you move house. And so it's just figuring out what can we do with no technology, no CTO. Tom and I are non-developers, so figuring out how to do stuff manually was where we started. And right at the very beginning, again, it was Tom, a phone, a Google sheet and a Squarespace website. That's how that's where it came from. And then it was, okay, well, I've got a customer that wants help moving house. How do we figure out what we're doing and connect all those suppliers? And it's very much chicken and egg at the beginning, where you haven't got any moves coming through, you haven't got any bargaining power with any of the suppliers that we now work with. And so it's quite chicken and egg, almost a marketplace dynamic in that regard. And at the beginning, it was, okay, well, can we go and sell energy to somebody? Yes, okay, but on its own, it's not that interesting. And our original audience that we would sell into was estate agents who would then introduce it to their customers. And trying to just get them to talk about energy to their customers they weren't that interested in energy as an isolated product. Then you add council tax, and okay, interesting, and water, okay, more interesting. Removals, okay, and then gradually you're creating this turnkey solution where you've got what we used to call the service was concierge. It was concierge for home movers when we began. Now we call it the home setup or home move platform. And gradually more services made the overall proposition more compelling to somebody to introduce their customers. And so those services we started with and began to forge deeper relationships with those suppliers in those core categories and adding additional suppliers directly. And we didn't want to go through intermediaries or through comparison sites to build those relationships, which took us much longer, but actually now means we have more control over that customer journey behind the scenes. But we always saw, I touched on this earlier, we saw the move as the entry point into your life, where there are so many things that have to happen before you move, as you move, just after you've moved, and then over the course of the next year or two where you're settling into that property. And there isn't anywhere to do all of that stuff centrally. So that was always the long-term goal, the long-term vision, was to build this platform for managing your home and ultimately your life. And insurance is such a key component to our lives that we knew that was going to become a big focus for us as a business. We had to get the fundamentals right at the beginning, which was to provide value around council tax, water, sewage, gas, and electricity, and managing that change of occupancy process. And we weren't even making any money from that at the beginning, just notifying suppliers that you've gone from house A to house B. And then it was, okay, well, we need to introduce home insurance, buildings, contents, an obvious place to start. We did that initially working with a broker who was doing the selling on our behalf, and then gradually moved up. We got we're now regulated, directly authorized by the FCA, and have been for I think over 3 years now, and started selling ourselves with other intermediaries to manage that process and really trying to embed it as much as possible into the experience. So all of this stuff has improved over the course of the last few years, where we've now got a very slick embedded insurance technology journey within our product, where we can give you a quote with actually no questions asked at all, because we already know a lot of information about who you are as a customer because of the way that we integrate with our partners, which could be, as I mentioned before, it could be a fintech business, it could be an estate agency, it could be a conveyancing firm, tenant referencing business. And all of those partners have the core information that we need around who you are, where you're moving to, and when. And then we enrich that data with the APIs that we have to identify the suppliers that are already in a property, the size of that property, what year it was built in. And a lot of those questions are required by the insurers to give the quote. So we can just streamline that whole process. So it's now it's a really nice experience. And the next stage for us now is, how do we move into other areas of insurance? Which is why not everybody can see us necessarily as an insurtech business. Sure. Like, how are you at all related to that? But that's absolutely what we're doing, which is building out a mechanism whereby we can create all of those milestones around not just the move date, but as you're moving, you may also have a car insurance policy or a life insurance policy that may not renew for 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And the point that we help you, but if we can do a great job on the way in, manage that move experience, maybe sell you the home insurance policy, we can then say, well, would you like our help in 6 months' time, Alex, when your car insurance is due for renewal? We can send you some quotes. That would be great. Yeah, please, thank you. And that's the vision. It's those other insurance products that you will definitely need at some point. And we're using the home move to try and access and build a relationship with you at the beginning. And if you have a look at our Trustpilot page, we're super proud and very focused on maintaining those reviews, because we build a relationship with that customer at the beginning, and you'll see people refer to their move specialist, which is the person that helps somebody move in, usually over the phone. That's that relationship building where we can then help them with different products down the line. And protection insurance actually is one of the things we've just introduced after the initial conversation with the customer, and that's proving very successful. So that's critical illness, life, income, and rental protection. And yeah, that will naturally grow. So we very much see ourselves as an insurance business. Yeah,
it's fascinating for me from the perspective of thinking of that data that you have, because it's the perfect embedded model, right? Essentially, you've got a richer existing relationship with the customer, and then you're in a better position to offer them a better insurance experience as a result of that. I mean, I've been throwing my toys out of the pram in the office lately because health insurance, and we've got that classic thing where it was underwritten and now I've got a claim, and now I've got to prove that I didn't have pre-existing conditions and all that sort of stuff, and then you have to go to your GP. And my point was, why haven't you got that information already? You know, why would you? And now this may be that I just don't understand health insurance as well as I thought I would do. But we still come back to this narrative, particularly when we look at home insurance. As you say, I'm in the process of moving to a new property, already looking at quotes, and they're going, well, how old is the property? How is it built? How is it constructed? And I just don't know the answers. And I don't know why I'm expected to know. Yeah. And so the idea that especially when all that information is essentially, and the thing about moving is you get asked this information so many times by so many different people. And that's you just want to have this single point of truth, which is, a business like yours, and go, right, they know, ask them. They'll deal with it.
I think the other key point you mentioned, which is an interesting one, because of the way that we're delivering the service, we're actually not selling in the traditional sense that you might, if you were looking for a specific product or being pitched a specific product. You're moving house, as I said before, you have to do this stuff. Yep. And sure, you don't have to have insurance in every case, but if you're buying a property, you definitely do. And if you're renting increasingly, you should have some insurance in place to make sure you're covered. We're just going through a list of questions with people, whether they do that digitally through our interface, where they can say which services they want, and if they can manage the whole process online themselves, or if they wish to come through and speak to somebody because they have some questions, and they can also do that and book an appointment with one of our team. And so they will then take the customer through a journey of saying, you've said that you want help with X, Y, and Z. Let me get some feedback from you around what you're looking for, what your requirements are, and then we'll make some recommendations, and you can take the recommendations or not. And so it's a very different traditional sales journey to what you might have. And I think that is also part of the power of what we're doing, which is to build that very long-term relationship where we can make a recommendation, if they don't take it, no problem at all, on to the next question. And they never feel like they're being sold to. And that is, again, it's a really powerful journey.
I was just wondering, I don't know if you can share this data, or I'm sure you have it, but how many people are kind of like first-time buyers? Because I think first-time buying specifically, there's also a lack of awareness about what you actually need. When you first buy a property, do you know you even need life insurance as well as home contents, as well as kind of like, the property insurance itself? Is that because the reason I wondered whether it's a higher proportion, because I've moved a lot, so I know how painful it is. So I'm more attracted to your business, but first time buyer, maybe there's a naivety there that you go, I don't need that. I was intrigued about that. Is a makeup of your customers?
Yeah, well, it's probably broadly representative of the overall market. And as we sign partners that do either sales or lets, it tends to skew in a different direction. So of the 10,000 moves we processed in September, probably the split is 70-30 towards rentals at the moment. But actually, there's a number of large sales organizations that we're in the process of working with and going live with that will skew that back closer to 50-50. And the makeup of those customers is very diverse. It could be anybody who's 18 years old, an international student renting for the first time, or it could be a Premier League footballer. We help a few of those moves. I can't say any names, but there's a particular club that we currently work with and process those moves. And then at the upper end of the scale, you've got people in their 80s who have maybe never moved house before on their own. Their partner may have passed away and they're downsizing and they just need help. And actually, if we just had a purely app interface and experience for them, they wouldn't be able to use our offering. They want to speak to somebody. They want to get on the phone, have a conversation, and they actually have got a lot of disposable income because they're older. And So I think that's really important why we have this blend of digital as hybrid journey, as we describe it internally, where if you want to speak to somebody, you can do. If you want to do it completely online, you can do. It's about matching up the experience based on the mover. And we know first-time buyers are definitely a captive audience because they've never done it before. And if you don't move house that often, maybe when you're younger and renting, you move more frequently, but buying, you certainly don't move that frequently. And again, people have got questions, they're not sure where to start. There's a lot going on. They're dealing with getting a mortgage, conveyancing, that whole process, and there's a bunch of legal stuff to sort out, as well as all of the move itself. And that's where we try and come in and become a friend to them at that point of a lot of stress that's going on.
Yeah, I can think of the times I've bought, and a friendly voice would have been really useful. But I think that's important to acknowledge as well, that we're very, particularly in the insurtech world, we're very keen to digitize everything. That's fine when it works. You know, unmentioned health insurer is a perfect example. They've got an app which they absolutely rammed down your throats about everything's on there. I'm a guy that's 41. I use a lot of technology. I cannot work this thing. It's like baffling to use. And then I think about my parents who are in their 70s. I'm like, there's absolutely no chance that they're finding their way through it. But they're so pushing it that they've gone almost too far. So there's not really a blend. It's like if you try and get through to someone, it's impossible. So, and I think when you're talking about things like insurance and moving, these are kind of real emotional big shifts in your life, and actually just sometimes having someone to talk to, regardless of age or position, it's just reassuring, if nothing else. It's that proper sort of it is that concierge type of experience that you kind of really need in those that trusted advisor that you need.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I suppose I'd be amiss if I'd be a very unprofessional interviewer if we didn't talk about the kind of macroeconomic environment. You know, there's been a lot of talk, particularly been some wonderful stuff happening with the economy lately. Presumably that doesn't particularly impact you. It just sways it maybe more towards renting than buying. Yeah, I mean, what impact has that had at the kind of state of the property market in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, well, if we go back to a few years, I mean, COVID was challenging because the move market froze for a number of months and then came back online. But the bigger impact of that wasn't actually so much the moves drying up, because they were still being processed and we were still doing some decent volumes. It was actually on the new partners that we were working with or about to sign up that just had to stop and pause the conversations with us because they were figuring out how to keep their own businesses alive. And so that was challenging, where we expected to see growth coming through and onboarding new partners. We didn't see many new big ones coming through for 12 months, really. So that was an initial challenge and impact. And then, of course, that was beginning to tidy itself up. And then the energy crisis kicked in with the war in Ukraine. And the impact for that on us was that a lot of our revenue was coming from energy switching at the point of somebody moving into a property. So we would do a change of occupancy, moving them from company A to company B, and then recommend a new supplier. And historically, there was always a saving to be made at that point of moving in, because they would be on a standard variable tariff as they went into that new house. We would move them into a new supplier and get paid from those suppliers for doing that. And that just turned off overnight in October last year. So that was a real challenge. And the reason being the price cap that was in place was making it unprofitable for any companies to take on new customers. Well, even their own customers, their existing customers were loss making for them in most cases. And so that meant that we had to get very good very quickly at the other services that we had. So insurance, broadband, removals, and other things that we've now moved into. And whilst it was incredibly challenging, actually now in hindsight, it was a good thing to have gone through. And I think we're a stronger company as a result of that. And coming back to your specific point around the current trends in the interest rates going up and that falling and causing more sales properties to fall through. And certainly there's been a lot of disruption, I think, to many of our partners that are in and around the sales space. You're completely right. The rental market is usually way more buoyant when the sales market is not, because people are going to rent for a bit longer. They're going to sit on their hands, see what the prices do in the property market. And so that's we've definitely seen that, and we'll see that coming through, I think, over the course of the next year. And some of our partners are forecasting a slight drop off in their overall move volumes as people just stay in the properties that they're in for longer.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how all of that pans out. But for us, we're very fortunate in the sense that we're agnostic across both markets, so it shouldn't have too much of an impact on us as a business, thankfully.
Yeah. Insurance is pretty good for that. It's pretty robust, and you can't escape it. It needs to be done. Because someone was asking me about that sort of insurtech environment, but I was really conscious about that with a business like yours as well. Is that almost how do you pitch yourself? You know, prop tech, insurtech, or does it depends on the trends in the VC investment market.
I knew we're talking to.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you about that. You've got some insurtech specific investors on board. Has that impacted the way that you look at insurance or your insurance offering? Has there been, whether it's been any insight or just increased emphasis, has that changed anything at all from your internally?
Not massively. I mean, we're fortunate. We've got a lot of great investors who've supported the business since we started raising money, and many of which have come into subsequent rounds since. Comes back to getting the fundamentals right. So if we're doing a great job, and we're doing a good job, but we're not doing probably a great job at the essential part, making all of that just smoother, streamlining it all, working more closely with suppliers. And we've probably invested more time and money into these areas than I think any other company in the UK that we're aware of, because we think getting it right is fundamentally crucial to that long-term success. But there isn't necessarily lots of money in the free services, but it's where you can provide the most value. So it's getting that right and then moving into the other areas. So we've not been pressurized at all into monetizing more quickly, and we know that is there. It's coming through. We've got some good revenue now coming from insurance specifically, and long-term trail revenues from that as well as people renew their policies. But it will naturally become, as I mentioned earlier, insurance is going to become a even bigger part of what we're doing over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah,
interesting. B-Corps, we mentioned them earlier. Very early into your journey to incorporate into a B-Corp. Why was that so important to you as a business? Because it's not, we talked about this when we first met, it's not like you just go, we're going to be a big B Corp. There's so much structure.
Definitely not now. Definitely not now. It's really hard.
So why was it important to you as a business? And I suppose what I wanted to follow up from that is kind of, has this enabled you to attract different talent? Because we're obviously a talent business, we're a recruitment business. I'm really interested about that, because that's really wearing your values on your sleeve, I think. So why was that decision made, and what impact has it made, really?
We were always going to become a B Corp. That was always part of the conversations that Tom and I had. We probably didn't know enough about the process at the beginning. We'd seen and admired brands that were part of the original founding B Corp membership, so Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, companies that were doing good as part of their business. And it was, why would you not be a B Corp? That was the question we asked ourselves. And looking 10 years ahead, we're thinking, well, if you're not a B Corp, who's going to buy your products? Who's going to engage with you? Because there'll be companies that are, and it just seemed like an obvious thing to do. And almost, conversely, why wouldn't you do it? So we set about in 2018, I think probably the year before, we actually started the process of, we need to start now thinking about what this looks like. And it's not a straightforward process. There's a lot of information gathering you have to do. There are a lot of buckets of specific data that you have to pull in, which covers things like governance, workers, environment, community, and customers. And so across each of those areas, you have to go and do and provide evidence that says that you're doing whatever it is that you're claimed to do. There's an assessment process you have to go through, 180 questions. And once you've provided all the evidence, you then get assessed by the charity that sits behind B Corporation, which is B Labs, and they will then go through all of your dirty laundry and make sure that everything you've said is accurate, and you've got to have evidence for it. So as an example, we were switching homes to renewable energy as part of our big focus to try and move towards a greener economy. And as part of that process, we said that we've switched X thousand properties to renewable energy. Well, that was great, but they wanted to see the certificates from the suppliers that we've done that. So then you have to go and speak to the suppliers and provide the evidence. So you really can't, you definitely can't blag your way through the process, and it's a tough process to go through. I think the bigger you get as a company, the harder it gets as well, because there's just more stuff to unpick. Supply chains, just everything about what you're doing becomes more tricky. We recertified over the last year for the first time, and it was harder because you've got more employees, and you've got to maintain the same levels that you did when you were 7, 8, 9, 10 people to 50, and then hopefully beyond. And that is, you've just got to be fully committed. It's got to be driven from the top. But for us, it's been a brilliant way to. It's a great framework for the business. We describe it as a fair trade coffee stamp for a business. That's like a nice way to think about it publicly to anybody who doesn't know what it is. And then it has definitely been, I think it's probably one of the main reasons why somebody wants to come and work for us, because they know, without knowing anything about the people that work there, what they're all about, because it's a fantastic blueprint. And I think that is, we saw very early on when we first were in the process of certifying to become a B Corp. We actually hadn't certified, but we'd put in a job ad that we actually described ourselves as B Corp pending, which we were very ignorant to what that term actually meant. And at the time, we weren't pending at all. Pending was for a company that was less than 2 years old that was doing it. We were just in the application process. And we had written that we were a pending B Corp. We'd been through the application process on one of our job ads. And somebody reached out to us who was incredibly overqualified for the role. They'd previously run a successful business, a multi-million-pound business, and were applying for this role that was a customer service role. And I actually just ignored it initially, because I thought and we had so many applications and we were busy at the time. I feel bad for saying it, but we kind of ignored it because it just seemed like it was a mistake. It just seemed like it was just far too good to be true. And then they were very persistent. They kept reaching out. They reached out to Tom, and I said, "Have you seen this person who's applied for the role? They just look amazing, but it must be a mistake." So I reach out. So I had a conversation. The first question I said was, "I've got to ask, why are you applying for this role? Because it seems like it's either a mistake or, I don't know, something must be wrong." And they said, it's because you're a B Corp. And I don't need to work. I've seen the application form. I look at the website. I love what you're doing, and I just want to work for a company that's doing good. So that was a bit of a wow moment for us. And from then on, it's really been at the heart of everything that we've done promotionally wise as a company. It's on the very first slide of all of the sales presentations we ever do externally, or our investor decks. The B Corp logo sits on there. And I think now it's become relatively, not everybody knows the B Corp logo, but a lot of the brands that are B Corps will promote it pretty heavily on their labels. A lot of consumer brands that are now B Corps will do that, and you'll see it on their packaging, you'll see it on their ads. It's becoming something that is it's a real statement, and it's definitely become probably cool to be a B Corp, I think, more recently. But still, even with that tag, it's a very hard thing to get. It's very hard to maintain, and you definitely can't plug your way through it. So from a recruitment point of view, it's been very powerful. As a retention mechanism, definitely as well. I think it's within a business that is a B Corp. There are certain things you have to do. You have to give your team time off to do charitable work over the course of the year. Historically, pre-COVID, we used to do things as a group. So we'd get the whole team and we'd go and do beach cleans, or we would sing to the elderly, or we would clean rivers. We've done all sorts of stuff over the years, or help with homeless charities. And now we tend to do it in smaller groups just because it's easier and less disruptive for the business. But even this week, we've had some of the team down on one of the local beaches in Dorset doing another beach clean. I mean, they cleaned up 70 kilos of rubbish from a beach, which is scary. Yeah. But the point being, this is the stuff that people really live for. Yeah, working for us is great, and it's a nice company, and we're working on some cool stuff. But it's the purpose that sits behind it that really gets everybody out of bed, and me out of bed in the morning. See how much impact can we have as a business. We're also part of 1% for the planet, which is where 1% of our revenue goes to supporting charitable causes. And I think we want to do more and more. And we've been planting mangrove trees for every customer that we help first, well, going back as far as I can remember. But that's again also now, everyone's planting trees, which is fine, but actually, are they being planted? Where they're being planted? Is it having the impact that they should? Yeah. Is it a bit of greenwashing? So we're now looking at how can we change things, what can we do differently. So beginning to offset people's moves is one step, pushing them better towards within our digital experience, actually letting them know the impact of their move, because moving home is quite carbon intensive and there's a lot of stuff that happens that could impact your score. So beginning to give people a score so they can see how they're doing, and then naturally beyond the move itself, nudging them towards other things. So if we're doing a great job on the way in, I mentioned about other insurance products, but what about other financial services too? So their pension, as an example, where's their pension? Are they backing stuff like oil and tobacco and things that they may completely disagree with as a consumer, but they're unaware of what their employer, where they have their pension sitting. So that's an area that we're also looking at, which is divestment, and I think we're well positioned to go and do that as well.
That's so interesting. I was thinking about my pension.
Where is it, Alex?
Well, it was in a green one, but I think it was doing so badly I shamelessly switched it.
No comment on that.
Hey, I'm a converted vegan, so you know. But then I fly too often, so it makes it a nonsense. Ross, I could talk to you all day, and I'd be very tempted to, but I'm really conscious of our time. We don't want to overstay our welcome. But I always kind of like to sort of finish on, you know, we're talking in the late end of 2022. So what does 2023 hold for you guys and the guys that just move in? New territories, new countries, new products, all of the above?
There's lots of exciting stuff going on. So in summary, I mean, next year it's going to be a transformative year, I think, for us. We're working with a lot of new, big, very well-known, exciting new partners. So we should see our move volume double over the next 12 months at least, which will get us to 150, 160,000 moves roughly, which is really exciting. Moving into new areas in terms of the brands that we're working with, so embedding our service into different types of organizations. That's really exciting. We're very UK focused for now, and whilst we have looked at other international markets, the UK market is so large for now that we need to go and we already are one of the largest providers of what we're doing, but become the absolute market leader here, and then see where things go from there. From a product technology perspective, lots of new exciting things coming through, really building on the digital journey that we've launched 12 months ago, and adding more service providers and making that journey as slick as it possibly can be, and trying to remove as much of the stress and the hassle for the customer as possible. So that's really where we're focused, as well as from an ethical point of view, as I've started to mention, trying to do more from a sustainability point of view, and really making that at the heart of every decision we make.
Brilliant. I'm quite envious of well, firstly, you've got through the B-Corp thing, because I keep thinking about it and then I see it and I think,
just do it.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I should do. Well, we're small enough to probably make it do it quite easier than should. But yeah, there's so much there that resonates with me. So, Ross, I'm glad we got a chance to do this, because I'm glad you're feeling better, and we managed to do it from that perspective. But
I haven't coughed once, so I'm very pleased.
Yeah, I know, you did well. I had a little sneeze there, but we skipped over it. But Ross, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. As ever, this is brought to you by FinPro Search Partners, the executive search firm for the insurtech industry on an international basis. If you want to find out more about what we do from a recruitment standpoint, please visit www.wearefinpro.com.